I'm going old school today. I want to go back to something all of you know. All of you probably know it. You should know it. Lord is my shepherd. I shall not. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord. Well, we are in the midst of a global pandemic. The entire world has been kidnapped and held hostage by the coronavirus. We had planned to have a normal worship service today, but the exponential spread of the virus in Shelby County warranted deeper consideration. The Bible is the foundational truth to rest upon during an affliction of a health crisis. Psalms 91 declares, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. You will not fear the pestilence that stalks in the darkness." All through history, from biblical times to this date, there have been diseases which have had its negative effects on mankind. Epidemics and pandemics will come and they will go. There will be diseases which will disrupt daily life and may lead to the destruction of many lives. What determines your peace and your eternal destination is the faith that you live out in times like these. It's how you handle yourself with the knowledge that if you're God's child, you're given a mandate to trust in Him, to lean on Him, to depend on Him, to rely on Him. God is the one to look to when living through an epidemic or pandemic is here. He rules over all. He is the only true God who is above all, having the power to control and guide the government in all the decisions needed to be made, as well as implementing the plans which have been set in place. He is all sufficient and able to provide everything needed to come up with a treatment, strengthen our caregivers, and bless them as they serve us in the hospitals, helping those who are already afflicted. He is able to give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and to help those businesses that are closing, economically face disaster. In my sermon last Sunday, I called this situation we are currently in a wilderness experience. Oftentimes, the promise of salvation starts in a place that is lonely, disorderly, and dangerous. Good news sometimes begins in the midst of trouble, tribulation, and torment. What seems to be a negative is a vehicle for a positive to occur. What seems to be a trying situation is sometimes a chance for triumph and victory. What seems to be a mess can actually turn out to be a miracle. Good news always begins in a wilderness. The fact is, we all have some wilderness experiences. We've all been through something that tested our faith. At one point or another, we can tell our story, our own private wilderness battle. We have had that desolate place in our lives where we dealt with temptations and snares. We have been in crooked places and valleys so low that we thought we'd never get out. We've been in our own private wildernesses fighting our own private battles. And if the truth be told, some of us are still in a wilderness. Whether it's a dying marriage or a dying loved one, we're in a wilderness. It may be a wayward child or an unfaithful spouse, but we find ourselves still in a wilderness. We may be in a state of joblessness, on the verge of homelessness. We're still in a wilderness. We're in a place where we are struggling for our lives. If we're not fighting poor health, we're fighting powers and principalities. If we're not involved in church conflict, we're in the midst of marital conflict. If we're not wrestling with God, we're wrestling with church folk. We are tired and tried and tested on every side. While wild beasts are trying to devour us, demons are trying to take us over. Desperation and despair have become our traveling buddies. We know all about the wilderness. We know every tree, every bush, every hill, every valley. Many of us have gotten lost there, but we knew we were in that wilderness. We have been wandering in wildernesses for years looking for a way out. And now there's a new wilderness, and all of us are in it together. Some of us have given into discouragement and doubt. We have lost our faith and have given up on all hope of seeing this wilderness leave and allow us to go back to normal. We cry out, Lord, how long must I dwell in this barren land? When shall I receive your promise of deliverance? When shall we lay down our burdens and cease from wandering? Our spiritual condition must be in good order if we are going to endure this pandemic. Our faith must be strong and our trust in God immeasurable. That's why I took a trip back to the 23rd Psalm. These are probably the most comforting words in the entire Bible. There is peace in these verses because we see the promises of God realized. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. We are challenged to have courage and trust in God as we walk through the valley, this dangerous valley. Whatever the state, whatever our state or condition, we should glorify God. Whether we are on a sick bed, or standing on the unemployment line, or living in a homeless shelter, our lives should demonstrate our faith in God. If we are true to our purpose, then we will always have our own proclamation. We will have a faith story, a testimony of hope. And all of us have a testimony about God's goodness. We didn't make it this far on our own graces, but only by the grace of God. We all can share our own personal autobiographical sketch of how God has made a way out of no way for us. That's our proclamation. Now, that's my proclamation. We can tell how God fed us when we were hungry. We can tell how he gave us a place to lie our head when we were homeless, and how he gave us one more day when we thought we didn't even have a few more hours left. We have a story to proclaim, and a people need to hear it. Are you seen as a child of God in this pestilence, as one who is trusting the Lord, resting in his goodness and faithfulness? Or are you seen as one who is overreacting, hoarding what others might need? Are you making ways to minister to those who are homebound and may be afflicted? Are you reasonably obeying those in authority whom God has placed in charge to get a hold on the present situation? There are many examples in history that can show us how life can be met bravely and effectively regardless of the tragic situation that we have come to find ourselves in. Claudius, the great Roman emperor, stuttered and could not speak. He yet came one of the greatest leaders of the Roman Empire. The poet Milton wrote the most beautiful poems you could ever imagine, even though he was blind. Robert Louis Stevenson seemed to produce the greatest works when he was physically in pain with his lupus. Beethoven had to be satisfied writing his music, even though he couldn't hear it because he was deaf. Martin Luther King Jr. jumped out of a second-story window when he was a child trying to commit suicide. And yet God used him to be the leader of emancipation of an entire generation of people. And the good news is that God will not leave us in the wilderness alone. We have a promise that God will show up, and he shows up in time. That's the promise that we have to hold on to. I chose the 23rd Psalm because I wanted to remind us of a few things, and bear with me here. The first step of the 23rd Psalms is to let the Lord be our shepherd. Stop trying to be your own shepherd. To accept his teachings and his leadership. The green pastures and the still waters represent the things he would teach us for the journey we're on. Then begins working inside us, setting our spiritual lives in order so that we desire to do what's good and love one another. That's represented by restoring our souls and leading us in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. But we still face challenges. We still face and live in external situations out in the world, and we are subject to desires that arise in those externals in our bodily lives. That's the valley of the shadow of death. But I see that the rod and thy staff represent truth from the Lord on both external and internal levels. And as we keep following the Lord, he will prepare a table in the very presence of this pandemic that will soon fade. A place inside us that he can fill us with love, that's the anointing oil. A place where he can give us wisdom, that's the overflowing cup. That's transformed. We can enter heaven with the love for others, that's goodness. And the love from the Lord, that's mercy. That's mercy. And we're loved and so loved by him. Now, watch this. One of the most beautiful things about the 23rd Psalms is that the Lord does everything. All we do in the 23rd Psalms is walk through the valley. The Lord does everything for us. All of his promises are what he is doing for us, as all we do is walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I'm reminded of the children of Israel, as all they did was have to walk through the Red Sea. As the Lord dried the ground for them to walk upon. Sometimes all you got to do is trust in the Lord. We are the sheep of his pasture. We are the sheep of his pasture, and as the sheep of his pasture, we have to keep our eyes focused on the shepherd. Where the shepherd goes, the shepherd said, it's what we obey. We follow the shepherd. Any sheep that strays off is victim to the wolves and to destruction and to their death. But we keep our eyes on the shepherd who cares for us, who takes us to the water to drink, who makes sure we go to the pasture to be fed, who anoints our heads with oil, and then promise us that goodness and mercy, somebody ain't hearing me, goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our life, and we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is time when faith must take. This is the time. Your faith is challenged and tested. This is the time. You better stop jiving. Stop playing around. Come on, choir, y'all can come back. Come on. This is the time when you better stop. Because something's going on now that's threatening our very existence. Never did you ever think this modern world be kidnapped and held hostage by Michael. But yet here we are, sheltering in place, and wearing masks over our face and sanitizing our hands, not gathering like we used to. Families can't even come together hard. Whoever thought that we could see a day like this in the 21st century? Whoever thought that we could be trapped and hog wrestled the way we are? Whoever thought that as powerful and smart as our technologies are, that we can become the victims of a bug that would force us to leave our jobs, close our restaurants, our movie theaters, our theme parks, cancel flights and trips, airports, not flying any longer. But I've said for a long time, God either causes something or God allows something. In either case, we have to trust in the Lord. In either case, we got to believe God. In either case, we got to keep on keeping on. Yes. We got to go on even though we don't feel like going. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard, especially for Americans to stay locked up in apartments and houses. It's going to be hard. The days that are ahead are going to be worse. That's why we have to trust and believe in God. My beloved, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him. He will direct thy path. This is a difficult time. It's a rough time. It's a hard time. It's like it's like something that we never could even prepare for. But yet, we got to believe God. And we got to trust God. Yea! Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. This is the time now. Not only world, church, but the unbelievers will learn this. Even the atheists will learn this. The agnostics will learn for this, because at some time in all of this, even the atheist gonna say, my God. The agnostic gonna say, help, Lord. Those who have denied him will now call upon him. Those who have run away from him will be coming home to him. Beloved, I thank God for each and every one of you that are watching this broadcast and the few that are in this sanctuary this morning. Workers that have come to make this broadcast possible. Once again, I love you so much. God bless you. God bless our volunteers. We're going to be feeding children who don't have lunches at home to eat. We're going to be giving them lunches here. Every day, Monday through Friday. And on Thursday, we're going to give away boxes of hamburgers. You see, a church is more than just a Sunday institution. Church is more than just preaching and singing. Church is a kind of hospital. It's a caring, treating place where the people of God help those who are in need. If the church doesn't respond to this pandemic, should. Who will? If we don't, who will? I've been told by others I should stay home. They said, your age, you ought to stay home. But I say to you, if I die, let me die serving God. Let me die serving God's people. I fear not, because I told you already, my trust, my faith is in the Lord. Now, beloved, we normally have a giving period, a giving time. And this is going to be at us today without us to give here. Some may. Sanctuary with me. But I'm asking you to support and sustain God's church. The unbelieving, the people that are not parts of churches, all they ever see with churches is money. That's all they see is money. Somebody asked me the other day, why won't the church close? I said, close? He said, yeah, the churches ought to appear. So tomorrow when we start feeding all of these young children that need food, you want us to close then? Do you want me to close? Do you want me to close Thursday when we provide boxes and boxes of frozen food for families that desperately need them? You see, we know that when other folks started stocking up, buying all the things they needed for 2 or 3 weeks, we know there were so many people didn't have money to go stock up. They didn't have money to go buy extra food. They probably used all the credit on their EBT cards already. You understand? So we know that as a church, we've got to do more. And that includes what we do Monday, Saturday, versus just what we do on Sunday. Greater money has been on this front for 31 years. We've fed people all over the world. We've taken millions of dollars in medicine to Africa, crutches and eyeglasses. We were in the Caribbean when devastation hit there. We've been all over the world doing God's work. And we did it because we're called to help. Now, we need your help. We need your help even if you're a member or not a member. Church must be sustained. Church must be financially supported. No, I'm not getting a salary. No. We need to sustain God's house. The Bible actually says, take care of God's house. That's the rule in my house. We take care of God's house. And beloved, I said all of you that are watching this morning, faithfulness is being tested. The true worshipers are going to show themselves. The true worshipers are going to step forward. The true worshipers are coming. They're going to show you who they are. Not by what they say, but by what they